period. Do we have anyone online?
No, we don't.
We have no one online, and we have no one in the audience, so that's presumptive. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of our previous meeting from December 8th. We'll entertain a motion for action on it.
Move to approve the minutes of December 8th.
I'll second that motion.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the first topic of discussion, and that is our update on the rescue plan funds. And we'll hopefully be joined shortly by Toby Faber, who is our contracted consultant on the issue and decision making on the allocation. But his partner in crime is here, as she is every day.
Stacy.
And
I'm moving him over to the panelist.
Okay.
Just stay here.
he's on, so I'll let you guys decide how you want to tag team on it. Whenever you're ready, either one of you.
Yeah, so I'll just, I have a feeling once he rejoins the meeting, he'll show up in sort of surround view here on both of our screens. And I'll let him lead the discussion. I know he's had meetings with all 3 of you, I believe, or at least conversations, and
You know, I have not been able to schedule yet.
there he is.
There he is. Looks like we're getting the play-by-play.
Sorry.
Hey, you're fine. Okay, either one of you, whoever wants it, jump ball.
Want me to just walk through it, Stacy?
Yes, please.
Okay,
yes.
great. So there was an updated memo from our memo that was provided to you in November around the ARP plan. That updated memo really didn't change a lot, but I will highlight a few of the changes. In goal 3, in the matrix in goal 3, I added a bullet under objectives called countywide grant opportunities for businesses, municipalities, and nonprofits, because I had always intended or always thought that we would have those grant opportunities built in there, but we didn't just write it in the plan. And I think that was the majority of the comments that I received from some of you, was how is this going to be, where would the opportunities be for other nonprofit applications, for municipalities to potentially apply, for airports to potentially apply, for small businesses to be able to apply. And it would really fall under, I think, goal 3, but really geared out of some of the revenue from the providing revenue replacement. It would that revenue replacement amount of 14.6 million will provide the most amount of flexibility to be able to do some broader grant programs that would have a lot of eligibility in terms of types of projects that people could apply for. You could also do things that are very specific, but it would fit, I think, in this bullet. So I added that. And then further down in the memo, it described the 2 options that we had presented last time, option A and then option B. Option B was presented the last time as largely drawing all of the funding down, except for the money that had been already previously awarded to the universities as revenue replacement. After some feedback from our last meeting, I'm really recommending, and I would have recommended it at the last meeting with option A. Option A would really be awarding the funds or having the funds go out under the goals in the matrix with $14.6 million, or roughly $14.6 million being drawn down as revenue replacement to provide more flexible funds. And then all of the other projects would be reported on with performance criteria per the ARP requirements. So today, what I'm hoping we can do is get, you know, an approval and acceptance of this plan at a high level that we can take this plan out to the public. And so I added in some next steps in the memo. The first next step would be develop and distribute public and stakeholder online surveys. And those surveys would be targeted to get out in January and February. So we don't have to have an end date for the survey time period before we can actually look at results. We can look at results as surveys come in. But then we would also at the same time be working to establish teams of subject matter experts in the county to help guide grant program and project development. And that would be specific under the different goals and objectives. So, you know, just for example, the first goal was around physical and mental health, and it's dealing with housing and mental health, and, you know, some improvements at the prison and job training. So we'd want to work with the leadership, the staff leadership within the county around those specific areas to be subject matter experts to help to guide the details of how grant programs or funding would best be able to be used to help achieve those objectives or improve areas of those objectives. Then in the next task I had was to identify potential projects under each objective. So I'm envisioning that we would have our initial feedback from the survey, and we'd be working with our subject matter experts and have teams together, or, you know, one or two people in each subject area to really frame the, you know, grant programs or financial money distribution, how it would work. So in the case of projects like under goal 3, for example, the first objective is to make county building improvements. In that case, it may not be a grant program. It would be physical improvements to some of the county buildings. And so they might be projects that are either done with county forces or potentially, you know, through contractors. So everything may not be a grant program, but we would come up with a plan to advance those projects and how each one of those areas would move forward, and who the subject matter expert leads within the county would be. And then I could coordinate with them, help to get them written into a grant program that could then be advertised and accept applications if it's a grant. If it becomes a project where we need to be able to accept bids from contractors, then we'd be able to help work on getting, you know, a bid package together to be able to go out to bid projects out and advance projects. And we would come up with a schedule around those things as well. So everything wouldn't get out probably in February, but some things may be higher priority to be able to be advanced quicker, and other things may take a little more time to get, you know, get details in order before you could, you know, put them out. But beginning in February, anticipate having some of those potential projects begin to frame them up, developing the grant programs, goals and objectives for each one of the programs, and the details, keeping it as simple as we can, not to make it, you know, overly complicated, so that I've already heard that some of the grantees and some of the potential grantees in some of the areas, you know, are stressed and have difficult time staffing things as it is. So trying to keep the grant application simple, and then if we narrow it down and decide that we like certain applications, if we needed to ask for more information to get clarity or clarify scope or things like that, we can do that once we would go through a scoring process. But then we would, as part of the grant applications, we develop guidelines, objectives, performance metrics, and a subrecipient monitoring plan for each opportunity. So it may not be that we have a subrecipient monitoring plan at a high level that that can apply equally to every opportunity. We may need to have that be specific to each opportunity depending on what it is. So I would envision that being part of each grant program. And then as a grant program is ready to potentially be advertised, or we would have something framed out, we would come back to you with that grant program, be able to highlight that, relate it back to this plan, also relate it back to the public involvement information that had been received as well, and then be able to make a recommendation, for moving forward with a specific grant program with an advertising date. If that would be approved or modified or whatever, but we would, once we be able to get an approval for that, then we could advertise, get applications, review and score those applications with the subject matter experts, and then develop recommendations to be able to come back to you for approval, prior to, potentially awarding anything, and get your approval prior to awarding, in the same way we went through the process for the university grants. Any questions on that, or any specific questions around how maybe certain things might be able to be covered or dealt with in terms of priorities within the goals or objectives we've proposed?
Yeah, I have one or two questions, and I'm not sure if this is the right place to insert them or not, but I'll get them out on the table. If you want to address them later, that's fine. But the under the next steps, the stakeholder online surveys.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed you mentioned about keeping those very targeted and such, and that's certainly going to be something we're going to watch, because one of the how do I put it? One of the past occurrences we've had here before is when we've done online surveys, is we've had interest groups come in and weigh in en masse, essentially turning it into a lobbying campaign. Mm-hmm. And that's really not how we should be approaching our allocations here. Can you expand just a little bit on how that's what that targeted approach you're mentioning is? Yeah,
so the ARP legislation really focuses on how disadvantaged populations will benefit or potentially benefit from ARP investments in particular. So one of the things about doing online surveys that I know is that when you do online surveys, they tend to get a higher response rate from higher income, higher educated people. It's just a reality of it. So I thought it was worth having a targeted focus on trying to make sure we get good representation from that disproportionately negatively impacted communities. And I had some thoughts on potentially how to do that, but I want to get a plan written out on it. Some of those thoughts include, working through some of the nonprofits that currently work with some of those disproportionately affected communities, some targeted advertising through them, targeted outreach through like CareerLink, and some of the other organizations that help to work with some of the lower income minority communities in the county. Because everybody will have equal access to that survey, but not everybody will respond, may not pay attention and respond, and that the response rates for different income groups, I think will be, and ethnicity groups, I think will be important to keep track of. I don't have a thought just off the top of my head on how to address or deal with interest groups and them sort of like loading up responses on the survey. So like, it's a good point, and I'll try to work on coming up with an approach to address that.
That's good. Thanks. I had one other question, and
Sure.
it's kind of out of left field here a little bit, but it's in relation to some of the requests we have gotten. I think this came up before. Forgive me if I'm just misremembering the answer, but some of the requests have been from organizations who want our grant funds in order to fund their grant funds. And I think that automatically raises a concern about the reporting and monitoring of the use of the grants. So at the same time, some of those are, have real promise. It allows us to use an organization that has far more knowledge on how those dollars might be applied than, than us sitting here in this room. So can you address that a little bit? Do we have, are there legal issues there that we in particular need to pay attention to, or have you given any thought to how we can structure those in a productive manner?
My initial reaction to that would be that if we identify, here's an organization that runs a grant program of their own that has been very successful and would help to address, one of the county goals or objectives somewhere. And we think that grant program would help us to achieve that goal or objective. There's probably two ways to address it within ARP. One way would be to draw money down as revenue replacement under Goal 3, and then we can report the money to the federal government as revenue replacement, and then you could potentially award a grant or fund a grant program that then goes through a competitive process to by another organization without need to report performance metrics, detailed performance metrics to the federal government on the outcomes of that secondary grant program. Doesn't mean that the county wouldn't want to have reported outcomes, and I think that would be important, but it would get rid of the step of needing to report outcomes to the federal government. A second way to handle it is, let's say job training is, somebody has this great grant program that's out there that they run that really does great things for job training, and we really like it, and it's countywide, and it has good benefits and whatever. And, rather than build a separate grant program under ARP that would, compete with their grant program, you could run it through that revenue replacement thing and then augment their grant program to do that. The second way to handle it would be to, if we really like how their grant program is administered and works, would be to run it as a county grant program, but basically adopt their goals, objectives, the way their grant program works, and work with them to make sure that the county grant program would be advertised. And then you could definitely report on it, as with the federal ARP rules and things like that. And that would be similar to the way the university program, worked in theory, right? That university program went out as a county grant program, but we worked very closely with the redevelopment authority. CADIC. We worked very closely with CADIC on the development of it, and we talked about it being a CADIC program where the money would potentially go to CADIC and have CADIC run it. There was a decision made to have it be a county grant program. We worked very closely with CADIC on developing the grant guidelines and advertising and things like that. So I think there's probably a couple avenues that you could pursue or work with others on that.
Okay, good. Yeah, because actually CADIC is one of the organizations that is also making requests to refill their grant program coffers. So that's partly where the question came from. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Good answers.
And I think, Toby, the only thing that I would add is that as we start bringing forward projects, if we started to notice the balance of these three, the monies that are today, hopefully, going to be allocated for these three goals, that we would then request a reallocation.
That's
So
correct.
that, we'll be very upfront and forward with any changes we believe are necessary as we start implementing projects.
Right. So like, that's a really good point. But just to give you a for example on that one, let's say the county building improvements item, which right now we have in parens a 7 because the total projects right now were estimated to add up to about $7 million, which could be less than that, or it could potentially be more than that, or it could be that 3 of those projects, the county decides aren't priorities, and so there's less money potentially be spent there. And then maybe supporting affordable housing, you get 6 good applications that total $3 million, and you really want to award that $3 million for affordable housing because you think it's really going to have a big impact in the county. It becomes a high priority. We can come back and recommend reallocations of funds to this. This is not meant to be requesting approval to finalize these buckets as permanent. It's meant to be a guiding document for the development of grant programs and allocations for designing these grant programs or projects, around the budgets that might be available for them. But if we come back or if we get projects that aren't performing well, even like we could go out and say we're going to do affordable housing, and we start out and we have projects that are underperforming in that area. We award grants and have good intentions, and then they really underperform. You could, or aren't going to spend the money. You can drag some of that money back and reallocate it and use it in other areas. So I would expect that there's going to be some back and forth between staff and the commissioners over time at future finance committee meetings to address how money is going to be allocated in these grant programs and how grants will be awarded.
Hey, Toby, Vince here. At least for now, under goal 3, the last bullet, where it says countywide grant opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Would that be part of the 14.6 where it says provide revenue replacement?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. So we would, for the purpose of reporting to the federal government, we would draw down money as revenue replacement, and then we would be able to use some of that allocated money toward a single grant program that might have multiple potential allowable uses, or maybe several grant programs that would allow uses in, and we would come back to you with proposed grant programs and guidelines for those, and then get approval with budget amounts for them prior to going out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Toby, I appreciate the flexibility in this program. That there's opportunity there to change direction and the opportunity to truly vet things and make sure that they apply within the guidelines of the program. And I appreciate all the work that you've done on this.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm just kind of the focus point here, but Stacy, Kirk, Dana, there's a lot of other, and that compliance committee, there's a lot of other people that have really helped to guide this. And I've listened really hard to everything you all have been saying as well about, wanting to have things be competitive, wanting to have it be open, wanting to have things scored. I think are all really good, but also needing to have some flexibility. So, we've tried to design it to achieve those things.
And I think that last point that you made about we give away this money, that we can still go and check to see what is happening with the money.
Right.
And have the ability to take some of it back if it's not being used appropriately. I think that's very important.
And I think the monies will be reimbursement based. So, you know, if you you're going to have the money and you have to make conscious decisions to pay it out if it's in compliance with the way the agreements are structured. So you're not going to have to go call money back from somebody or have repayment of funds necessarily. We'll be verifying that the activities were eligible and fit with the grant program prior to making payments and, you know, achieving goals.
Stacy, did you have anything you wanted to?
No, Toby covered it very well. Thank you, Toby.
Sure.
Okay, that's all on that for now then. Thanks, Toby. Good stuff. All right. Well, if there's no other questions on that, we'll move that item. We'll move on to the second discussion item for today. And that is the Cumberland County Library System conditional funding request. We have Carolyn and Jeff Swope from Gloucester with us today. So
Yeah, Jeff along with future questions for a library. He can speak very well to the opinions of the library directors. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this opportunity today. It was kind of unexpected for us to see a 2022 conditional grant possibility. So we were thrilled, and we were already talking about grants because of ARPA funds and things that were available. And we're also working on a strategic plan that's likely to be adopted next Monday. So a lot of things are happening and changing and moving forward at the library system. So the 5 projects that we came up with, they do total 100,000. I have a typo at the end of my description of E. It should be 10,000, not 20,000. So I went back and found that. But the first project has to do with changes that happened at the county that were unexpected to us. The county moved to a new Outlook server, and it can't, because of the way technology has evolved, it can't accommodate the member libraries anymore. And so it's been a service that we've been able to take advantage of for a long time, but we do have to move over to our own tenant. They're working hard on that project right now, finding some glitches with it, but eventually we're going to be on our own email tenant. The things are already set in place. It's getting our accounts moved over now. And with that, we do need to also move to Microsoft 365. And as you probably know from talking with IMTO and looking at their budgets, it's an expensive prospect. I mean, this is an addition of probably 90,000 or more to the library system's budget just to do that project. So the amount that we're asking for to complete this project does not cover that fully, but we were asking for, when we complete that with the implementation of both Outlook and Microsoft 365 and the training of staff for an award of $25,000 for the completion of that project. While we're working on that project, we're also recognizing that security, a lot of the security things that were handled by IMTO are going to fall onto us. Not that we didn't already have security on our minds, especially as we were building the strategic plan, we were seeing that there's some practices that need some updating, maybe some policies, along with that, some training. So we talked about doing a liability study and looking into getting cyber insurance, because we won't be covered anymore with the county on that, and getting some training for key staff like library directors and other people who work in tech, very higher level technology, getting them some training. So with that, we were also asking if we complete that for an award of $25,000. And then, so those 2 are technology related. The last 3 are more projects, more taking place in the libraries and in the community. So C is one that we've been long talked about, ways that we could work with social service agencies, social work agencies, private or county, but mostly when we talk about it, we talk about how can we partner with county agencies. And so starting to have those conversations, sitting down and finding out one-on-one, how could we be of benefit to them, and how can they be of benefit to us? We have places where people come who really could benefit from the services the county has to offer. And we think that there could be some ways we could individualize the ways that our libraries are working with them. There's so many examples of this already happening around the country. Ephrata Public Library just put in it's a phone booth where people can walk inside, close the door, and push a button for what kind of, I'm going through a divorce, or I have, mental health concern, or I've got a drug addiction. And the right person comes on and talks to them. I mean, I have no idea if that would be a possibility for us, but that would be an example of maybe a private industry collaboration that could happen. Or maybe it's just giving people a place to meet with their parole officer. If it's not convenient to come all the way to Carlisle. So we don't know what it looks like until we start talking to people. But anyway, so that was a project that we thought could be really beneficial to us and to the county. And we're asking for an award of $20,000 upon completion of that project. The next one has more to do with the social makeup or the cultural makeup of our communities. We recognize that they've changed over the years, and the census figures are really starting to bring that to light as we're seeing those. We'd like to do a study of the census figures and figure out what kinds of services do we need to change or expand or enhance within the libraries. This past year we did translate some of our brochures and our library card application and a few other crucial documents into 3 other languages. Don't know if I can rattle them all off, but Somali, Spanish, and the other one. I can't remember the third one right now. But we've been talking about that. Like, does our website need translation services, or do we need to offer something in our libraries? Should we be offering story times in multiple languages? And how can we do that? And so this would be just to study do a community needs analysis on the 2020 census figures, and then figure out how we're going to expand and diversify what we offer through the libraries. And we were asking for a $20,000 award to complete that project. And the last one, I think we talked about this in the focus group that we did with the commissioners. We talked about school partnerships, and that came up a lot during our strategic planning process. And so we're talking about ways that we can work with private and public schools to maximize the use of our resources and our impact on the community. And we had a lot of ideas that came through for this, were things like signing up people for the library cards in a more formal atmosphere. Dauphin County has an example of this, where they work with schools and they get the school registration records imported into their system. So they're getting it upon agreement. There's an agreement with parents for sure, but they're able to easily import those records and get those kids cards without the formal steps of coming into the library. We are interested in making visits to schools. We already do this, but doing it more, building the relationships to get us in the doors and visit with schools, whether that's meeting with students or with teachers, maybe to offer an in-service or training on using our resources, meeting with teachers and parents specifically to teach them things like how to read to your children, for early literacy help, and sharing resources with them. We have one example right now where we are sharing with 3 school districts our ebooks program, but we'd like to expand that to more schools. School trips to the public library, that's happening. I know it's happening in New Cumberland for sure. They're right across the street, but could we get that happening in Shippensburg, for example? So just expanding those relationships on many levels. And so for that, we're looking for an award of $10,000 to complete that project. And so all of those totaling up to 100,000, and we did work with Keith to draft a memorandum of understanding, which is it's going out in the board packet to be been sent to them to review and hopefully approve on the 20th of December. Do you have questions about these projects or about anything else that we're doing?
I don't have specific questions right now, but the one thing I would mention is I'm generally supportive. These are great sounding programs, but they're very high level, they're very conceptual, there's no work plans associated with them or anything at this point. So we just had the conversation in regards to how we're going to spend rescue money. Of course, we're very concerned that we get real value for the dollar too. So I would hope we would carry that through here and expect to see a little bit more about how you intend to implement these effectively to, we said it full establish relationships, establish partnerships. There's kind of nebulous. So I have no reason to understand why we need $20,000 to do that. But there may be a plan that could justify that. So I would just ask that we keep an eye for it.
So my understanding of these conditional grants was that they weren't necessarily equal to the amount that is spent on the project. It was a reward for or award for completing the project. Where, for instance, the Outlook project, Microsoft 365, is going to be far more than the award that we were asking for. But the project with the schools, I mean, at this point, we can't quantify. It costs a different amount to pay Bosler's staff to go one place and Amelia Gibbons staff to go another place. And we weren't going to build out a budget and say, they'll only spend this.
In all honesty, we've kind of done it both ways here because you can either, do an end result or you can do a milestone plan.
Yeah.
It's called milestone, but we're paid for completion of milestones.
Yeah.
And we never intended it to be a milestone plan, and yet the last time that's how it was presented to us. We did step 1, get paid, step 2, get paid, step 3. It wasn't really intended to be done that way. So we may need to have another conversation on what the expectations really are, because it's sort of shifted, I think, over time.
If I may step in, being sort of out of this part of the conversation prior, that was not originally what we intended to request the last time. We wanted to request a single funded $100,000 project.
Yes.
And it was indicated to us that probably asking for a single $100,000 project was not the route to go. It was indicated to us from you all to break it into pieces.
I think the original intent, as it went when we first did it, was to fund multiple projects, not to take one project and break it down to milestones and then fund milestones. So I think that's kind of where this disconnect has developed. And we need to figure out among ourselves how we want it done. Are we checking off boxes and doing it for completed things, for completed steps, or are we doing it for completed projects? So this conditional funding thing is, started off very well intended and I think reasonably well defined, and it kind of morphed over time. And part of that too was the transition in position from
Right.
Janelle to you, and I'm sure we were really on top of it to the degree we needed to be. But we do need to, we need to feel that there's adequate value for this, and we need to also send that signal. At the same time, we're going out to everybody else on recovery money and saying, you need to have rigorous development of results, achievement-oriented outcomes. And we need to ensure we're doing that inside as well as our expectation for the outside. So we might want to work out some understanding on that yet.
So if I may, Carolyn and I spent a great deal of time talking about these projects, as well as a myriad of other projects. And internally, they have lots of other grant opportunities. And so they really were looking at which of these projects made the most sense to come forward here versus, to look at some of the other grant opportunities. And I think where Carolyn and I ended up with that this would be, look, these are the 5 projects that we'd like to move forward with. What will happen is a great deal of reporting back so that no money will be provided to the library system until a robust presentation on here's the project, here's what we did, here are the outcomes that we have for this project, are provided to the board. And so I think we certainly have time to really flesh out what that looks like, because there have been a lot of transitions, right? Carolyn and I are both relatively new to this process. So I think that between the two of us, we would really welcome some additional feedback on what is the best way to present the full project as it is fleshed out, and then also as it is completed.
Okay, that's good, because the entire concept of conditional funding was to be accountability oriented as opposed to just, a blanket. And we just had this conversation too with, with the Economic Development Corporation, when they asked for money for base preservation. I said, well, what are you gonna do with that? What'd you do with last year's money? And they couldn't answer it. So it's really hard for me to vote for an allocation based on an aspiration as opposed to a plan. So, but I'm satisfied with your answer.
Right, yeah, we're not really asking for the allocation today. I think Carolyn just wanted to come forward and really more just provide for you. Here are the 5 projects we've identified. Before there would ever be an allocation, there would be another meeting. And frankly, Carolyn and I talked about, much like several of our other partner agencies, having her in quarterly to kind of give an update on where they are with the project.
And I do want to say, these are very relevant projects. I really do like them because they're addressing real needs. And we haven't always had that, not necessarily from you, but in general. So I just like to connect the dots between what we're spending and what we're getting for what we're spending. So.
She was very excited to spend time with you. To come back quarterly, I just wanted to say that she was very excited about that.
Carolyn, just clarification on goal E. I just want to confirm the request is for 10,000 and not 20, because it's noted as 20 in another document.
Yeah, that's the one you mentioned a little while.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, so yeah, the table at the top is correct. It's the descriptions that are incorrect.
Right, and the only other question I have, and it's pertaining to issue A. Maybe, I'm not reading it correctly, but could that have been avoided when RIT made their changes?
No.
Okay.
No, it's
Please explain that.
Yeah, it's so my understanding is that I don't know if I can explain it fully, but Mark Adams explained it quite well, that the technology just simply evolved. Microsoft has changed it so that now when they I've been using the apples to oranges, that we were all apples, and then the county has moved to oranges. And the library system is they still have us over here, these apples, but we're not good for them. We're messing things up by being here, and we need to move. But it's too complicated, too costly to move us with. And when I say us, I mean the member libraries. If I understand correctly, the library system staff are staying. We're going to be oranges too. But so we have to move the library system staff over to their own tenant that we have to purchase and we have to manage. And I'm not sure why that decision was made, but we were told this was the decision, this is what was made, here's what you need to do. So we have gone out. Traditionally, we always purchased our own licenses and then gave them our license keys and they managed them. But the way Microsoft has it set up now, they can't do it that way for security reasons, and there's multiple reasons it doesn't work anymore. And so that's my high tech talk there. It doesn't work anymore. So we have worked through the intermediate unit based out of Lancaster. They are an educational seller of licenses, so we usually get a really good price on our licenses, so that was good news. But when you start adding on all those extra costs, we may even need to see extra staffing. We're not sure yet. We're hoping not, but it's we've been working with, we have our consultant, IMTO as their consultant. And we're working together to try to get, they even thought the move would be, they'd run a simple script, everything would just move over and we'd be independent, and that didn't work. So the two consultants are talking to each other and they're trying to get us, moved over so that we don't have to start from scratch with brand new email accounts. But it was, there were just, like I said, Mark Adams could definitely explain it. But it's,
Big apples and oranges.
yeah, as apples to oranges, and that's also why we're having this problem of migrating our things over, because we're apples on somebody else's tenant trying to move to our own oranges on our own tenant, and that doesn't talk to you.
Of course, Microsoft never likes being compared to apples.
That's true, I should call them apples, call them pears instead, but
There you go.
but yeah, it's been a really interesting experience, and of course, I have technology people working on it. I'm on the periphery, listening in on the conversations, making,
I guess the related question to what Ben said is, were we taken by surprise by this?
I was taken by surprise, but not complete surprise. I mean,
Okay.
we've known, it's been about a year now that we've known.
Right.
But
Surprise or no, we're scrambling a little bit.
where we're scrambling is with the migration of the accounts.
Okay.
We thought it was gonna be very easy. There's a script that they provide, and you should be, Adam was gonna work with our consultant, and it was gonna be so easy, and then they tested it with some accounts and it failed, and
Well, we have plenty of experience with computer folks. It's gonna be so easy.
yeah.
Until it's not.
Yeah.
You can ask the public safety.
Yeah, so it's definitely, it was a shock to us to have that added expense. We didn't anticipate it, but we'll find a way.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So is this an action requested item today?
it's more to make sure that these projects would meet your approval so that my board can sign the memorandum on Monday, the 20th, and get that back to you for a future meeting for you to sign it.
We could do a couple of things. We could either break this apart and approve any components that are urgent. Or we can endorse the concept of, go ahead and take this to the next step of planning, or a combination there. So Stacy, do you have
I think that, Carolyn, for your board, having the endorsement would make that conversation probably go very well for them to sign the MOU. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
all right, so essentially a conceptual approval to move forward with planning for these.
Right, because as soon as we have conceptual approval, that's when we will start sitting down and saying, okay, what does this grant really look like? What does this project really look like? It's setting goals and
The
milestones.
board would be prepared to take an action on it today, so if anybody wants.
So I just want to make sure that I understand, because this motion is a motion to approve. What is on the agenda is a motion to approve the Cumberland County Library System conditional funding request for 2022. Is that really what we're doing today?
I think so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just don't want you in the position, Carolyn, where we modify this, right? Where we get into this business where we're chopping things up today. And you come to us and you say, okay, we counted on your integrity when you passed a motion. And the library system is here for its $25,000. And then you end up jumping through super high hoops, or the hoops change, or the game changes. I don't want the library system or you in that position.
Well, my understanding is, my experience has been that is kind of how this conditional grant process has worked.
Okay.
That we've had tables just like this with
Okay.
projects, and when we complete them, and even throughout the process, we come back and report, but when we complete them, we report on them and you vote. And so
Again, it's happened in different ways. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure we completely squared up what the original intent was versus what That's that. I'm curious, Stacy, should we perhaps, if this is truly a commitment, then should this maybe go to Keith first for review? Because I absolutely am saying that if item E, for instance, if there's not an ample plan for that, I don't vote for it.
And that's what the memorandum says. It says that the commissioners are the final say on did this project
Meet the
meet the
completion.
needs
Because
of,
it's reimbursement based.
So, and
Right.
he's already done the work.
Keith's already written
Yes.
that document.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm fairly certain that as part of the conversation of the MOU, we discussed this. So what this is doing is it is approving the request. It's not approving the allocation of funds.
Right.
That's, and that's what
That
I wanted to
happens,
be clear about.
yeah, that happens upon my reporting on these.
Thank
that
you.
we-
Right.
So we don't count, these funds aren't even in our 2022 budget.
Right.
Because we have no idea if we'll get them or not.
Right, okay.
There was maybe 2-3 years ago, we had an issue with one of the goals had not been.
Project was in the prisons, it was,
Awards, and that was not awarded, so,
that was working with the prisons to,
yeah, something with the prison.
do school, or not school, but do reading programs with the inmates and their children.
Right.
And,
That didn't make-
It's nice. But it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, we had a proposal to have it happen, but it. So we weren't awarded that, and that's a good example of that along the way.
All right, we want a motion then?
Well, I will move to approve the Cumberland County Library System conditional funding request for 2022 as presented today by Carolyn Blatchley, Executive Director of the Cumberland County Library System.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any further questions for them? There are none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
There are none opposed, passes you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very important. Okay. Thanks, Jeff, for being here. Did you want to add anything?
No, not at all. Not at all, other than I will tell you that there's already been a lot of chatter about some of these projects, so I'm hopeful that the things we have in mind will come to pass, because there's some cool things, so.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks for being here. Okay, let's move on to item 5. That's other business. Do you have other topics that come forward?
I have none.
Okay, so that being the case, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Crazy.
We'll add the,